Hi, and welcome to CMO Journeys, where we sit down with the marketing leaders shaping some of today's most innovative brands. I'm Christian Banak, and I explore the stories behind CMOs, how they lead, how they grow, and how they think about partnering with agencies. Today's guest leads one of America's most iconic heritage brands, King Ranch. It spans 825,000 acres in South Texas and touches everything from cattle, farming, and feedlands to a John Deere dealership network and the King Ranch saddle shop retail business. Now the company is evolving a 170-year-old brand for a new generation, and guiding that transformation is Chief Marketing Officer David Zucker. Welcome to the show, David.
Thanks a lot, Christian. It's nice to be here.
Excellent. So, David, you're just a few months into the new role at King Ranch. What's been so far the most energizing or unexpected part of stepping into a brand with this much history and emotional weight behind it?
Yeah, two things. So the most energizing is actually the ranch. So a lot of people who know of the brand King Ranch don't realize there actually really is a ranch. As you mentioned, it's 825,000 acres, the size of Rhode Island, southern Texas. So that is unbelievable. There's real cowboys, we have real cattle, horses, the whole thing. And so that's really energizing. The most exciting thing really is just the fact of what this family's all about. And it's just what they're wanting to do and innovate with the organization. It's just really exciting to be part of.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I had not, really was too familiar with King Ranch, being a city boy up in Chicago. But yeah, such an incredible experience. I'm looking forward to learning more about all the different aspects and how you're approaching it, from a marketing perspective. But before we get into King Ranch, I want to talk a little bit more about you and your journey. You've had a very unique career arc, from a PhD in environmental economics to Priceline, HSN, Dell, Gilt, Omaha Steaks, Purdue, and now King Ranch. What originally pulled you from economics into marketing?
So with the analytics, the part of marketing that got me really excited was the conversion of numbers and economic theory into making money. And when I left my PhD program, the reason I left my PhD program was that after I graduated, we had our twins, and I needed money, and it was a lot more lucrative to go in and work in business than it was to become a professor. And I really found out that how valuable really understanding math and economic theory was, and converting kind of that consumer behavior into something that organizations could monetize, and then kind of just rose through organizations that way.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, interesting how some people come in from the creative side. You came in more from the analytics side. So I would love to talk a little bit more about how you use that background and that thinking in your work here today. So you've said that the more senior the leader, the more important experiences are from different types of businesses and models. What might be an example of an experience from a very different industry that still shapes how you lead today? And maybe it is that economics piece.
So two things there. Economics is, in the way I think about economics on the microeconomic side, is really, it's like the mathematical interpretation of consumer behavior. And so for me personally, my ability to adapt in different industries, the commonality there is the math and the economic theory side of it. And so whether I'm selling airline tickets at Priceline, or we were selling magazines at Martha Stewart, or we're thinking about the retail business here at King Ranch, you're thinking about consumer behavior, the things that drive it. That is a demand model in economics, and so it's attributes and things that drive demand. So that's the commonality. I think the thing for me that from a perspective of, tell me again what the question was on the second part of it.
What's an example of an experience from a very different industry that still shapes how you lead today?
From a different industry. So the fact that I've been in a lot of different industries, I would tell you that I wouldn't say that there's one specifically. I think the combination of them allows me to be pretty creative when I approach a new company. So like King Ranch, the fact that I've been at whether it's a travel business, whether it's a online consumer business in luxury discount retail like Gilt, um, even academics. It's the fact that each one of these businesses have different problems as it relates to the consumer. So when I'm thinking about the challenge that we have here at King Ranch, which is starting marketing really as a discipline for the first time, all those different experiences add up, I would say, to lead and think about some creativity as we're approaching whatever the problem is that we're thinking about.
Sure, sure. Got it. Okay, great. I know you spent some time at Purdue, and you really helped modernize a legacy brand there. But you also were really trying to make sure that you stay true to the trust, the taste, and transparency. How has that shaped how you're thinking about approaching a heritage brand like King Ranch?
Well, one of the significant commonalities between Purdue and King Ranch is that they're family-owned businesses. And, no matter what business a marketing person is part of, there's always nuances. Being in a family-owned business is a nuance, and understanding that the people that are sitting on the other side of the table from you, from a family perspective, it's their name and their heritage that's on the door. And so you have to understand, just as a business person, that while some things might make sense from a testing approach, from a theoretical approach, even from applicability, if the family doesn't want to do it, then you kind of have to say okay and just move on and find another opportunity.
Yeah.
So that's one of the biggest things. I think the other thing that we're thinking about at King Ranch is really how to think about marketing and what it means to an organization like this one, which is 170 years old, 180 family members. It's got an amazing heritage, but hasn't really thought about brand and marketing the way a consumer facing or even a business would be thinking about it. Bringing those experiences from other enterprises that I've been to here is something that we're pretty excited about.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Sure, some unique challenges, but also some very unique opportunities that come from working with a more family-based organization. Also to think about some of the other places you've stopped along the way: Omaha Steak, Vita Coast, Guild. From what my research has shown, that you've built some very sophisticated D2C and omni-channel engines there. What part of those playbooks do you think still hold true today, and what parts maybe need to evolve just based on the world that we're in now?
Well, I mean, the part that hold true is, look, consumers are constantly evolving. Both Vitacost and Omaha Steaks really started and built their businesses in the catalog direct to consumer space, and then transitioned at different points in time to a much more aggressive digital focus. What's interesting now is that a lot of these organizations are going back to using print media more than what's been done kind of in the recent past. So there's kind of really understanding that consumer behavior in the different channels is something that I think is important to understand. In terms of being innovative and going forward, I think the biggest complication that most marketers are facing right now, we definitely saw it in the businesses I was in, and I've got to figure it out here, is just the number of different channels you can communicate with a consumer with. I mean, I think we all remember, I'm old enough to remember, there was just a couple of TV channels, when I was growing up. And now there's, several thousand ways to communicate with consumers. Which consumer segments are focusing in different channels? At what point in their consumer life cycle with the organization do they think about getting information and are more likely to convert? I have to figure that out here. We don't really have any insight to that yet.
Sure, sure. Yeah, and I'm sure with so many different product lines, each product line is going to have its own channel mix as well, just sort of complicating things a bit. But I'm sure you'll figure it out there. So yes, let's talk a little bit more now about King Ranch. For people who may only know them from Ford Trucks or the Saddle Shop, how do you personally describe what King Ranch is as a brand, and what makes it so unique to work on?
So I'm very much still learning the way the organization thinks about the brand itself, we've got two very different components of, I would say, the brand. One is really the way that the organization makes most of its revenue now is through agriculture. So we are one of, if not the largest orange producer for orange juice in the country. We have sugarcane, pistachios, almonds, cotton. We have our own cotton gin. So we do a significant amount of agriculture, traditional kind of agriculture, and do it in a really well. And we think about sustainability in the way that we're doing it. And then the other part of the business very much is about the ranch. It is the focus of the way the family thinks about the business and the enterprise. And the commercial agriculture that we undertake is really in service of protecting the ranch for the family. That's the way that we're thinking about it. Now, the challenge really is how to think about the ranch and the brand in a new way going forward. As you mentioned, most people know, me included, honestly, before I joined the company, know the brand through the Ford relationship, which has been wildly successful, one of the longest tenured partners with Ford. It's been over 25 years. They've gone through several other partners like, Eddie Bauer, Harley Davidson, which have not been successful as ours. So we think there's obviously a reason for that for both sides of it. The question is what is the brand outside of that? How else do we think about developing and creating value for consumers and the family and the ranch? So in 100 years from now, we can all look back and say, wow, you guys were doing some really innovative stuff. It's no wonder you've been around for 270 years.
Yeah, sure. And I know you're still kind of stepping into this, but with so many divisions, where are some of the first things that you feel need to be aligned or unified from a marketing standpoint?
Yeah, so there's two very different, I would say, marketing funnels that we're thinking about. One is just on the commercial side, most of our businesses are commercial, are commodities. And so, the orange juice, cotton, things like that. And so I'm not going to really spend a lot of time in those businesses. They're not branded. It's a commodity. It's just an entirely different kind of business structure to something that I can early on have an impact with. I think over time, there's clearly opportunities in that space for branded items, for example. The area of the business that I'm focusing on and thinking about more is the brand itself, the way that we've interacted with Ford. We've had two other recent licensing efforts that have gone on. One with Brown-Forman, it's a bourbon, it's only available in Texas, and one it's a local restaurant here. Some of them we feel kind of represent the brand the way we want it to going forward. Some of them we probably thinking about it differently. The way we're thinking about the brand now, we might have thought about it differently when it started. So what I'm thinking about on that side of the business, on the true branded side, is what's working, where is there an opportunity for a very authentic brand like King Ranch, which really, honestly, like when you look at the history, we were the first American ranch in the United States. We are the start. We are the authentic ranch. And so the question is what does that mean? How does a regular consumer get value out of that? Why would it be important to them to be associated with a brand like King Ranch? Clearly Ford and our relationship with them, that's been working. And so I've got to better understand why there's so much value there, and then how to figure out how to identify and capture additional value in other places for the organization. And ultimately the consumer who's really looking for, these really authentic stories and relationships with brands. There's 180 family members from the descendants that started the company. They are actively involved. We just had a board meeting the other day. They're there. They're asking questions.
So obviously you're stepping into this role. You're still wrapping your head around things. As you're thinking about these first 90, 180 days, what are some of those top priorities that you're setting across maybe CRM or brand or e-commerce or even the saddle shop retail footprint?
Yeah. So the great thing is that the company about 2 years ago hired a woman who has a significant amount of experience in the retail space. And they brought her in to really address some of the fundamental problems and challenges that we had in that business.
Yeah.
She's 2 years into a 1 year engagement, and she has completely changed the trajectory of that business. We're literally hitting records every day. I think the business is up like significantly high double digits this year compared to last year.
Yeah.
So the good thing is I don't have to focus on that in the near term. She's just getting the business going, getting data, getting the infrastructure set up. So that's good. Really, my focus has been around the first focus primarily has been around connecting with the family.
Yeah.
Reading and understanding our history, spending a lot of time on the ranch, and just literally absorbing the history and the emotion that is here. Because ultimately, Christian, that's really what the opportunity is. Because when people say authentic, you say authentic, and that word kind of doesn't mean anything anymore when you start talking to consumers. I've got to figure out how to convert that into something that's valuable. So I've been spending my time on the ranch. I've been spending my time with the family. And from a practical perspective, the biggest thing I've been doing is we have a family brand council, which is representatives from different arms of the family and different generations. Mm. And starting to help them actually understand, what is a brand? Mm. How do you think about developing? How do you think about what it stands for? How do you think about managing it? And then how do you think about communicating it to consumers? And ultimately, how do you think about gaining value out of it? That learning process was really important for me to start with them. So when we start to talk about, well, here are the attributes that we want to be known for. Here is ways we can communicate with consumers to reinforce those attributes. And ultimately, here's where we believe how and where we're going to get value out of. Like Ford relationships and maybe other relationships and maybe other ways that are different than Ford. That structure is a lot of where I've been spending my time.
Yeah, makes sense, especially in a situation like you're walking in with so much heritage and a family-owned business. Yeah, that's interesting. You're stepping in, I feel like, at a really interesting time because, Western lifestyle, from my outsider-in perspective, is having a cultural moment. But at the same time, competition is getting intense. Non-sort of endemic companies in Western culture are stepping in. You have your heritage brands like yourself. Where do you see maybe the biggest growth opportunity right now?
It sounds kind of, it might sound a little bit, weird, but the authenticity is really what our value is going to be. And I don't like using that word as you were talking about before. We were the first ranch in the United States. What we don't want to do is over commercialize. We're going to be very, very, very thoughtful. I've been talking to the family. 2 examples I've used for them in different industries. One is Hermes. So the difference between Hermes and Louis Vuitton, totally different strategies, right? Hermes is one brand. Recently, in the last 6 months, I think that they now have a higher overall value than Louis Vuitton, who has 75 brands. Mm. So Hermes has been around, very high quality, exclusivity, scarcity, long-term decision-making. Louis Vuitton, just a different strategy. Same thing, a totally different industry, but like In-N-Out Burger. So family owned, not, very different strategy than the way McDonald's operates, which is scale, large marketing investments. We are probably going to be much more on the Hermes In-N-Out Burger perspective. We want to do a few things really, really well. So consumers understand that there's a significant over a long period of time. So anything that they interact with us on, whether it's a shirt like I'm wearing, a Ford truck, bourbon, whatever it might be, that 25, 50 years from now, they'll still be proud of having that brand in their house or whatever it might be, as opposed to, just being very trendy, trying to capitalize on doing a lot of things, which we will not be doing.
Yeah, sure. The Hermes of Western culture. I love it. I see a headline forming right there.
That's where they started. I mean, a lot of people don't realize that Hermes started and still makes English saddles. They
Wow.
make, yeah. I mean, if you go to Europe, they literally are making saddles in their retail store.
Yeah, very cool. So when you're obviously you got a lot of work ahead of you here. When you're looking, at agency partners, and as we've discussed, much of our listeners are agencies. When you're looking for agency partners that could um, honor both King Ranch's legacy and also help modernize the brand, what might be qualities that would matter for you when you're evaluating partners?
It's a great question. One of the things I inherited here, Christian, was work that agencies had done for the organization before. And it's unfortunate because I think where the agencies failed the organization was not being true enough and hard enough on us as a company in terms of what we need.
Mm.
And so a better way of saying that is, look, if we're asking you for something, be sensitive to answering the question that we're asking if it's the wrong question, as opposed to really trying to understand, well, look, you guys are asking for this, but what you really need is you need to do this first, or we would ask the question in a different way. But don't think that just answering the questions that we're asking, if they're the wrong questions or at the wrong time, are going to result in bad information. Because, whether anybody likes it or not, everybody understands that when you work with agencies / consultants that, they're always thinking about their next job, their next role. We want long-term partners. I'd rather you say, hey, look, it doesn't look like you're ready for us as an agency. These are the things we would recommend you go doing. And be like, that's really, like, that's somebody I want to work with because they have high integrity on their side. They're asking for us to go do some things before we would be successful for them. And so this is the first time I've ever been in a company that's never had a marketing department before. I understand how to manage that. The teams that were here before me and they're here now that had to manage these relationships, I think in some cases, they just weren't serviced well by their partners. So that would be something I would recommend to agencies when they work with anybody, but anybody that was going to work with us is to be kind of literally that true to themselves and the discipline.
Yeah. Let's poke on that a little bit further. So you're the first really marketing department, and you're a person of one. How are you thinking about building out the team or building out the ecosystem to help you bring this to life?
I have no idea. I mean, a lot of it's going to depend on some of the things you and I were talking about before. We got to figure out what we have to go do. So, for example, there's certain things around brand architecture, brand management that we're probably not going to be a large enough, quote unquote, brand for the foreseeable future. What I would need internal discipline around that. I'm probably going to be looking for out of house resources to help me with those. From a creative perspective, creative thought leadership outside the company, production creative inside the company. I know that we can do with AI and one or two, probably given the scale that we're at right now, creative folks, we could do, email, we could do social media, we could do all of those kind of creative assets internally, but we need external help and really thinking bigger about how to convert a lot of what we're thinking about into a long-term creative platform. From an analytic perspective, I'm highly analytical. We might hire one or two analysts in the foreseeable future, but analytics is something that I have found, really regardless of the scale of the company, it's good to have a mix of internal and external people that are doing those work. So the way I'd summarize it is that we would probably rely more on production work inside the company, hiring that and staffing that internally, but doing more of the thought leadership, architecture development outside the company. That's where we'd be using agencies.
Yeah, gotcha. And obviously you've got a network that I'm sure you've built over the years and working at all the various places. So when you think back at the different agencies you've worked at, where do you typically discover them? Like, how do you find them in the first place? Is it the trade press? Is it LinkedIn? Is it awards lists, referrals, their thought leadership? Like, where did you kind of come across them initially?
Yeah, it's all of those. I think everything you just mentioned. One of the things that, discovering them is not really the issue. Where the opportunity tends to come for me in terms of how to narrow down this large pool, because there's a million people are out there. Like, you just Google like brand strategy or something. It's the ones that have worked specifically, either in the industry that I'm focused on or something that they've done that has been very disruptive in a different industry. And so the two things that I tend to think about when I'm working with partners is, do they really understand the nuances of the business that I'm in? So, for example, when I was at Purdue, food and communicating food to consumers is different than advertising, airline tickets. If you're a real travel agency or a travel type of, agency, like, doing food might be a little bit of a stretch. Not that you can't do it, it's like, I don't know, it's just, that's going to be a little bit of a stretch. As opposed to, if you were an agency that did something that was wildly disruptive from a creative perspective, that's really intriguing to me, because I think what I look for as a marketing leader, those are the two big attributes. Do you really understand my space, and can you really think outside the box? So it's almost like the two extremes
Sure.
of where I need to be challenged. You need to come, hey, if someone comes in and knows more about the horse industry and the cattle industry and ranching industry than me, amazing. You're on board. If you're someone that can say something to me and think about presenting a creative branding marketing opportunity to me that's just so outside the box, I'd be like, okay, I gotta digest that for a minute. How is that going to be valuable? That's really exciting. That's where I believe there's value from working with partners.
Yeah, no, that's great. And it kind of echoes some of the advice that we give to agencies, either, to focus on, specialization versus generalists, I think is critical. And, we come across a lot of agencies that do really good work, but it's not that great disruptive work that has really innovated the industry or done something totally unique and different. And I agree, you have to have one of those two, and maybe even both, to win in today's market.
I would highly, I mean, I would reinforce that point. I actually do think that you need both. The other thing that I would say, and as you were describing that, I think that the finer point I would just put on it is that one of the reasons I was hired here is, it was interesting when I was talking to the CEO during the interview process. He's like, you don't talk like a marketing person, you talk like a business person. I was the GM of Omaha Steaks in addition to being the chief marketing officer. When I was at Purdue, I ended up being the GM of the Canadian business. The marketing people, for the most part, understand this, but the agencies have to get this. If you present an idea, whatever it is, the business, creative idea, you've got to convert it into something that makes money for the organization. No matter what people say, this is a branding effort, it's an awareness effort. At some point, it's going to require an investment. That investment needs a return. And I think everybody probably listening to this, or, they're like, oh yeah, no, we get that. I got to tell you, 99% of the time, it doesn't happen. You have to start there. You literally start the conversations with, we have an idea that can provide 5x return. Here's how we're going to go do it. Not like, here's the idea and what we're going to do, and like, it's going to be this creative, amazing thing, and we're going to hand out all this stuff. And oh, by the way, it's going to take $1 million. We think if we're going to get, a $3 incremental return on it. Start with the return. Imagine you're literally talking to the CFO first, as opposed to talking to the CEO. That'd be my suggestion.
Yeah, that's really great advice. And I love kind of elevating that, because I'm even thinking about some of our proposals we've put together. We do try to put an ROI behind it, but it's usually the last page of a slide deck versus elevating it maybe to the beginning of the story. Yeah.
I'll be honest with you. So when I put my presentations together, the executive summary that I have, the first point the first bullet point in the first part of the executive summary is, we have an idea that's going to generate a 3x return on our investment. Now you got them. Now they're listening. It's because, look, as a creative person, all these agencies that are listening, I'm probably me get it. Like, we understand that the creative is how we're going to execute. The people that are listening to this, they're like, the shirt should be gray and not brown. And it's like, that's where everybody gets hung up on the creative side. What you want to do is, what I have found works really well, is you get them hooked on the fact that you know how to execute this and all of that. You know how to execute it, you know how to work with the partners. But the punchline is that you're going to deliver a positive return.
Yeah.
That's what it is. So start there. The first thing, now you got them. They're listening. They're like, wow, I'm going to invest $1 million here and I'm going to get, $750,000 of incremental margin. That's kind of interesting. Like, okay, tell me more. How are you going to go do that? All right, I just got to trust that the right agencies, or the right talent to use, or the right media plan to put together. Like, I'm going to trust that, as opposed to starting with all that stuff. And then they're like, well, this is the return we think we're going to get. It's a different way of, I don't know. I have found it much more successful in the first way of describing it.
Yeah, well, that's great. And I see your economics background maybe shining through there a bit. So this has been a good conversation. I want to shift the gears a bit and ask one final question. This is CMO Journeys, and I'd love you to look back on your career so far. What is maybe one lesson that you wish you had learned a decade ago?
That's easy. Always hire people better than you. So someone gave me this advice kind of midway through my career, and it completely changed my perspective. Very often, and it's the case now, especially with the pressure that we're all under as marketing people and leaders, is it can be nerve-wracking to hire people that are really, really talented, because it puts pressure on you, and is that person going to take your job? Look, yeah, it can happen. Parts of it's happened to me. I've had I've hired people, and pieces of my roles have been taken away and given to that person who've been elevated to be my peer. It's like, look, you just got to understand, that that's just part of business. So the thing that I wish I knew earlier was the fact that if you hire people that are better than you, and you're comfortable with it, and you know how to manage that dynamic, it immediately elevates you as a leader. And then you're part of successful efforts. Because then it's like the people that are managing you are like, look, when he or she is involved with these projects, they're going to be successful. And if he feels or she feels that having this other person as part of the team will make the effort more successful of the organization, that's what your leader wants to see. And so that'll be important when, or if you come up for a promotion. That's an amazing attribute for you to have as a staff member, employee of an organization.
Yeah, that's really great advice, and a great way, I think, to end the show. So, David, this has been great. I appreciate the conversation, the insights, and everybody watching, don't forget to follow CMO Journeys for more conversations with the marketing leaders shaping what's next. I'm Christian Badak. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next episode.